On this episode of Urban U, one of the most celebrated military units in American history, the Tuskegee Airmen, and their CUNY connection. Unbought and Unbossed. We share the story of trailblazing activist and educator Shirley Chisholm. We also introduce you to a CUNY alum who wrote about women who've influenced French fashion, and much more, including keys to success. That is, piano keys. Welcome to Urban U.
The Tuskegee Airmen were some of the most storied servicemen in the history of the American Armed Forces. As the first African-American military aviators in the country, their efforts during World War II have made them icons of both military prowess and the struggle for civil rights. And out of the over 900 Tuskegee pilots, several have a CUNY connection. First, a story of a mystery solved. Lawrence Dixon was one of 27 Tuskegee Airmen listed as MIA by the war's end, after his plane crashed along the Italian-Austrian border, never to be seen again. Dixon had attended City College prior to joining the war and had already been awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross for his service by the time of his death. But against all odds, a renewed search by historians, only in the last decade, led to a miraculous discovery of the wreckage. And in 2018, DNA testing confirmed Dixon's remains, solving the puzzle a remarkable 73 years later.
Maintain 2000, I got you loud and clear.
Another interesting story with a surprise here is Esteban Stephen Hotest, who, while from Manhattan, actually didn't go to CUNY at all. So why include him? Well, it turns out it was only through research from City College's Dominican Studies Institute that Hotest's heritage was uncovered in 2015, and then was appropriately honored in an exhibit on Dominican soldiers of World War II. And this is a big deal, particularly considering the large Dominican community of Upper Manhattan, because as of 2015, Hotest can be claimed now as the only Dominican of the Tuskegee Airmen. And an important one beyond that, Hotest participated in one of the most important incidents in Tuskegee Airmen history, the famed Freeman Field Mutiny, when he was one of 101 officers arrested for peacefully breaking segregation rules to enter a whites-only officers club. Our next aviator is indeed a CUNY alum, a City College grad. Charles Dryden stands out for his participation in a unique program of the war, what was known as the Civilian Pilot Training Program. In the lead up to World War II, the CPTP was unveiled as a means to train more civilian pilots by starting aviation programs at colleges around the country, City College included. Dryden would end up leading the first mission that saw Black American pilots engage enemy fighters. He would continue to fly through the Korean War, later becoming a professor at Howard University, and ultimately wrote an autobiography of his Tuskegee experiences. Lastly, perhaps the most prominent member of the CUNY community here, Roscoe Brown. Brown would achieve the rare feat of shooting down a German jet fighter during the war, and would be named commander of the squadron after the war. A robust life of public service followed, including humanitarian awards, winning the Congressional Gold Medal, hosting his own shows, including here at CUNY-TV, and also serving for 17 years as the president of Bronx Community College. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen is one of triumph over adversity, both abroad and at home. And today, their legacy is woven into everything from stamps and coins to Hollywood movies, even bus depots. And that legacy is woven too into the story of CUNY. For the record, I'm Murray Goldberg.
It wasn't always easy, but Shirley Chisholm fought hard to make her way in politics. A Black woman from a working-class background, Chisholm said, "You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines whimpering and complaining. If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair."
Shirley Chisholm shattered gender and racial barriers and class barriers by being a successful and effective political activist. She was the first Black woman elected to the state legislature in Albany. She had to fight men to do that. The first African-American woman to be elected to Congress, and of course, running for the U.S. presidency.
Even as a child, Shirley Chisholm knew her worth. Having been raised by her extended family, Chisholm said, "Granny gave me strength, dignity, and love. I learned from an early age that I was somebody." An excellent student, she was accepted to Vassar, but her family couldn't afford to send her. So it was decided that she would live at home and go to Brooklyn College.
Once she got her footing and started getting good grades, she got very active in politics. Just think about this. She's a college student and she's a member of the Brooklyn League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and the Congress of Racial Equality. So she was quite an activist at a very young age.
In 1964, after 15 years of being involved behind the scenes in local Democratic politics, Chisholm decided to run for the New York State Legislature. Facing resistance because of her race and gender, Chisholm appealed directly to women voters and won. 4 years later, she resolved to run for Congress.
Shirley Chisholm makes history in 1968 because she is the first African-American woman to be elected to Congress. Nobody thought she was going to win. The New York Times writes an article about this campaign and doesn't mention her by name. Mrs. Chisholm comes up with a very good campaign slogan called Unbought and Unbossed. And it meant many things. For people in New York, unbought meant politicians couldn't buy you, and unbossed meant that no political hack or party boss could boss her around. But it had a deeper meaning. Unbought resonated with the idea that Black people could not be bought and sold as slaves anymore. When Chisholm gets elected to the House of Representatives, remember, it's 68. This is just 3 years after the Voting Rights Act is passed. The Democratic Party was still controlled by Southern whites, and boy, they did not like her. A Southern white congressman, after there had been a committee meeting and you sit around a table, she would get up to leave, and he would then wash the chair in which she sat. I mean, it was really repulsive the way she was treated.
What were some of the causes and issues that were close to her heart?
Her maiden speech was to oppose the war in Vietnam, and she went one step further. She said she would not vote for any military appropriations. She said the money that goes to the military should go to eradicate poverty in Brooklyn and everywhere else. The second passion of hers was for women's rights, and she introduced the Equal Rights Amendment. She was a big supporter of expanding educational opportunities for everyone, and she was a champion of veterans and for older Americans.
In 1972, Chisholm decided to run for president.
I am not the candidate of Black America, although I am Black and proud. I am not the candidate of the women's movement of this country, although I am a woman and I'm equally proud of that. I am the candidate of the people of America.
A lot of people labeled her run quixotic, and many did not take her seriously.
A new hat, rather a bonnet, was tossed into the Democratic presidential race today, that of Mrs. Shirley Chisholm.
But Chisholm forged ahead. One incident during the campaign involving Southern Democrat George Wallace showed her to be the savvy politician she was.
When George Wallace is shot during the 1972 campaign, every one of the Democratic candidates for the nomination went to visit him. And when Shirley Chisholm went to visit him, she was excoriated for it. And she more or less said, why shouldn't I go visit him? Everybody else has. And she had experienced more death threats than any of the other candidates. So she understood. And what is very interesting is even though Chisholm totally disagreed with everything Wallace stood for, Chisholm and Wallace ended up being not friends, but being friendly colleagues, shall we say, because they worked together politically for the rest of their political active lives.
Chisholm had hoped to win enough delegates to have some influence at the convention, but McGovern took the nomination on the very first vote. After her presidential run, Chisholm went on to serve 5 more terms in Congress before retiring in 1984. How do you think she would want to be remembered?
She said she wanted to be remembered as a woman who lived in the 20th century and was a catalyst for change. She also said she wanted to be remembered as a woman who had guts. And she had guts, and she had guts to spare.
I'm Scott Kirby for Urban U.
Still up on Urban U, from women who shook up the status quo to women who've influenced French fashion. Stay tuned for more stories and CUNY highlights. Picture this. It's sometime during the late 1800s, the Gilded Age. A ballroom is filled with the who's who of New York City. The women rule the room with their show-stopping gowns and neatly placed hair. They are socialites, actresses, and the wives of some of the richest men in the country.
The women I'm looking at are the Astors, the Vanderbilts, the Schermerhorns, the McKays, all these last names that we see on street signs in New York, on university buildings. These were the families that the husbands and the fathers were making money in railroads, oil, petroleum, you name it. And the women were spending the money on fashion and artwork.
French fashion, to be specific. And it was during this period that American women and French creatives cultivated an everlasting bond. Elizabeth Block details this in her new book, Dressing Up: The American Women Who Influenced French Fashion.
There wasn't, old royal monarchical money that was coming through. And that's why the U.S. women are looking to France and to Europe in general for taste. I mean, the French had always set the taste, je ne sais quoi, what is it about them?
Decked out in everything French, from hats to gowns and hairstyles, they were photographed and drawn wearing designs by fashion houses like Félix and Charles Frederick Worth. Their images appeared in top magazines and newspapers. Women throughout the country swooned and adopted the same style.
These are really sculptural garments. They're dresses that you want to see in 3 dimensions. And in fact, in my book, Dressing Up, I talk about how sculptural and architectural the dresses really were, and how women in the US, especially New York, when they were building their mansions on Fifth Avenue in the 60s and East 50s, they were wearing fashion that really fit the grandeur of the homes that they were in.
They were also wearing outlandish pieces to attend costume balls.
Kate Fearing, who wore this unbelievable costume, it was to the Vanderbilt Ball in 1883, and she's wearing a taxidermied kitten on her head. That's her headdress.
I was going to ask you, is that a kitten?
It's real.
Wow.
It was stuffed, and then her skirt had cat's tails.
Talk about a moment.
It
reminds me of like something Lady Gaga would have done now or recently, or Rihanna on the red carpet.
Right. Exactly right. I mean, you could wear this to the Met Gala ball on May 5th.
Wow.
French style became so sought after, the U.S. government cracked down on foreign gowns by putting tariff laws in place. With such restrictions, another phenomenon in fashion was born.
The knockoffs really start in this period. Some of these women were spending $4,000 per dress in their day, so that would be the equivalent of about $50,000 today on a single gown for a single event. We see in the literature that there are dressmakers from New York who are sent over by their bosses to France and to Paris to see the latest styles and to look at the latest magazines over there, and then to come home and make knockoffs, or in fact, smuggle a garment home in their trunk and bring it across on a steamboat and copy it in New York and perhaps put a fake label in it.
Bloch's interest in fashion from this era began as she studied late 19th century U.S. painting at CUNY's Graduate Center. There she found herself attracted to portraits of women and what they were wearing, like in this painting titled Madam X by John Singer Sargent.
I kept looking at the dress and I kept looking at her hairstyle and thinking, there's more here that we need to know about. And who could have made that black dress?
Who are you wearing this evening? Show us your outfit here. Who are you wearing this evening? Who are you wearing today?
It's the question uttered over and over again today on any given red carpet, where celebrity gowns are the subject of wonder. More often than not, a French designer's name is uttered, echoing back to the time when it all started. Abby Ashola for Urban U.
So excited to visit the Graduate Center and a great opportunity to visit a cognitive neuroscience lab. A great team there conducting cutting-edge scientific research. I had the opportunity to meet Professor Dennis Sullivan, who just won the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for Mathematics. Also visited the Digital Humanities Lab, met some of the students who participate there, creating publications, curriculum, had a chance to meet some of the students in the master's programs, in the doctoral programs. So very, very happy to be here at this visit and very proud of the intellectual leadership and the research that we're conducting here at the Graduate Center.
Throughout history, when there has been political change or social change, monuments have changed too, because our monuments are there to represent our society to itself. It's what we want our future to be, who we want our children to emulate.
Last January, the iconic Theodore Roosevelt equestrian statue that had stood in front of the American Museum of Natural History since 1940 was removed. The removal of the statue, after years of protests, was part of a nationwide movement, according to Erin Thompson, an assistant professor at John Jay College. In the time since the protests of 2020 following the death of George Floyd, over 200 Confederate monuments have been taken down.
So the protests that happened after the murder of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter protests, often centered on monuments as a means of dramatizing, demonstrating what the protesters thought was unjust about American society, or what counter-protesters thought should be defended in American society.
Case in point, protesters tearing down the Confederate monument in Lynn Park in Birmingham with their bare hands.
So it was really no surprise to see people trying to tear down the monument with their hands shortly after the death of George Floyd by roping it to a truck. If there's no legal, peaceful means to remove something, that seems to me to be the crushing of democratic debate.
In her new book, Smashing Statues, The Rise and Fall of American Monuments, Thompson explores the history of monument toppling, going as far back as 1776.
The fall of statues is something that accompanies social change throughout history. And I wanted to explore what I did in the book, how America got the monuments we have, and what are some of the reasons that are keeping them in place or causing them to come down recently.
She also began to track what happened to the statues once they came down.
Not a single Confederate monument has been irrevocably removed from view. The same with almost all of statues of Columbus and other controversial figures. Instead, monuments have just sort of been reshuffled. They've been put, instead of in City Hall Park, they've been put in historic battlefields, etc.
The Theodore Roosevelt statue was transported to North Dakota, waiting to be put into the new presidential library there when it opens in 2026.
It's not the toppling that's the point, it's the conversation that happens around the toppling. I talked to so many activists who wanted to stage almost a performance around the protest or removal of a monument so that we could change what our society looks like, not just change what that particular street corner looks like. People often say to me, wait, won't taking down these monuments erase history? But I think that monuments are only a very small part of our public memory of the past, and monuments are about honor, not so much about history. They're not textbooks. You're not going to get the full story from looking at one.
For Urban U, I'm Craig Thompson.
Barry Mitchell at Queens College's Erin Copland School of Music with a unique surprise for a talented music student. Come on.
I'm Matt Comastro. I'm a pianist from San Francisco, and I got my undergraduate degree in South Carolina, in Greenville, at Bob Jones University. And now I'm here studying at the Erin Copland School of Music, getting my master's in piano.
I asked the faculty to choose an outstanding student for this story. They chose Matt.
I went into music with the hopes of teaching. I really have a passion for sharing music, and that could be in performing, but I also really love just investing in the students that I have and inspiring them to be the next generation of musicians.
And what attracted you to the Erin Copland School was a favorite teacher.
Edna Golansky. I met her 2 years back. I played in some of her master classes at Berkeley. She developed a special technique that was meant to rehab injured musicians. So now I'm currently learning that technique, not because I had any problems, but because I'm trying to be able to teach that to other people who may have limitations while they play. I didn't sign up just for the teacher. They have a very solid music theory, music history program.
Hi, I'm the director of the music department. My name is Michael Lipsei. I'm also the percussion teacher here. Dollar for dollar, the best degree you're going to get. It's compared to all the other schools, it's much less expensive, and the faculty are first-rate, internationally known.
Is the Copland School of Music the Juilliard of Casino Boulevard?
Matter of fact, some of our faculty are actually part-time at Juilliard, so we kind of get the best of both worlds. We get a wide variety of degrees, from jazz degrees to education degrees, theory degrees, classical performance, and we're a fully stocked music department with an orchestra, an opera department, choral programs, solo recitals, big bands, the whole 9 yards.
I noticed you played a Steinway today. Do you know they're manufactured right here in the borough of Queens?
Yeah, that's really cool.
The reason we got you here today is we have a special surprise for you.
Oh.
Let me tell you about it. The late Henry Z. Steinway was the great-grandson of the founder of Steinway & Sons, the last of the Steinway dynasty to oversee production at the Astoria factory. Mr. Steinway was 87 when I met him in 2003. He was autographing a limited number of specially produced pianos commemorating the company's 150th anniversary. Henry Z. generously autographed a piano key for me, and this souvenir, the key to success, I present to you today, with the hope it will inspire you in your music studies and throughout your musical life. Matt, I promised Steinway I would never put this on eBay, but I didn't say I wouldn't give it to a deserving music student. So we're proud to present to you this singular key to success. And Michael has for you also a book from Arcadia Publishing, Steinway & Sons by Laura Lee Smith.
Thanks, Barry. This is a big honor. I'm going to take good care of this, and I'll take it home, put it on my bookshelf.
There you go.
We leave you with Matt Camastro's recent master's degree performance ahead of his May graduation from Queens College. Until next time, thanks for watching these stories from the nation's largest urban university, the City University of New York.